everyone, it's Nicole and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be repotting these 3 Phalaenopsis orchids. We're going to start off with the Phalaenopsis schilleriana, which is a species orchid. I've been meaning to repot this guy. And then we've got 2 mini phals from Hauserman Orchids. These are a little bit overdue, as you can see from the roots, but this is the Phalaenopsis Young Home Sun-Kissed. And then the next one is the Phalaenopsis Sin Confettio. I don't even know how to say that one, but we'll get started with the Phalaenopsis schilleriana. So sometimes I put orchids in moss and sometimes in Leca. In this case, I don't have clean Leca available at the moment, so I'm going to put these into Sphagnum moss and they'll be able to transition quite easily since it's what they were in. So we're going to start off by removing the Sphagnum moss off this orchid. And I see some good healthy roots here. I did not soak this very much, so everything is just a little bit moist. You could see a new root tip at the bottom, but so far it's looking good. Now, the first thing that I notice when I'm removing this sphagnum moss is that the top of the roots look a little bit hollow, which is why you could see that the top of the orchid sort of flops a little bit, but let's uncover that as we get the sphagnum moss off. So we've got 3 very healthy looking roots here, and with seedlings it's very important that you don't damage them, especially if they're small. But let's inspect what's going on here. So you can see the root tips. They look healthy, however, closer to the stem, some of them look a bit hollow. So I'm inspecting every root to see if they're hollow. This one, unfortunately, was very papery, and as I pulled it, there was really not much. It looked green in the beginning, but that root was dead. And I'm very conservative with cutting roots off, especially with seedlings, but that one was completely dead. So I'm cutting off some of the very obvious dead roots. However, I have to be really careful. This was a surprise for me to see some of the roots a little bit hollow on top, but it's still doing its job of bringing the nutrients up. But we've got that one root there that it goes all the way to the top. So I'm just going to repot this really, really carefully. And then this orchid should then start pushing out more roots. When I repot, I like to do the same task over and over. It just helps me move faster. So when it comes to taking off moss, I usually do that at once. And then when it comes to repotting, I also do it at once. So I've taken my shears and I've sterilized them. And as you can see, this has an abundance of roots. So this was pretty overdue. However, this orchid was also in bloom for quite a long time. So although it looks like it could have been repotted a while ago, I didn't want to mess up the blooms that it had. This was a really pretty one. I've gone ahead and removed the flower spikes, and now I'm taking off the moss that came with this orchid. Usually these are packed very tight, so we want to get it in a less suffocating sphagnum mix. As you can see, the roots grew outside, but having a fluffier mix will promote the roots growing inside. All right, let's move on to the next orchid. I'm going to be doing the same as I did with my last orchid, sterilizing my shears in between, cutting off the old flower spikes, and then cutting off the pot. This is another one that grew so many roots all around the pot. However, I noticed some white stuff in the pot, and they look like mealy bugs in the medium. So I'm inspecting this closely to see if they are mealy bugs, because I never noticed that at all. And it's the first time I'm seeing these critters. A lot of growers like to repot their orchids straight away just for this reason. You might have some unexpected bugs or pests inside of the pot where you really can't see them. There's really no excuse for me because this was in a clear pot, but it could be that this grew and developed later, but I have no idea what it is. For me, it looks like mealy bugs. And in order to confirm if they're mealy bugs or not, I went and grabbed some alcohol, and then I dabbed it with just a little bit of alcohol. And if you dab them, they usually turn brown once they are dabbed. Though I noticed I kept touching some of them with the alcohol, and it really wasn't turning brown, maybe a little bit. So I don't know if these were actually mealy bugs, because I find that they die right off. Maybe it turned a little darker, but I'm not sure if they were mealy bugs. I'm going to take a piece off so you could see it. I'm not sure if that was fertilizer or bugs or what, but what I ended up doing was I took off all of that medium, and then I wanted to make sure that those roots were as clean as possible, just in case that was a mealy bug or some sort of pest that wasn't welcome, that it would be dead. But we see another one, and I kept trying. I kept dabbing these things in alcohol on the side, and it wasn't. Usually when you dab them, they turn brown right away, and you could tell that they're a bug. But yeah, I just cleaned this off, removed as much sphagnum moss as I could. I removed virtually all of it. And then I sprayed this down with hydrogen peroxide and I let it sit until it dried. And then I did a rinse with my power wash in the sink. So hopefully this will no longer have any issues. So let's get to repotting these guys. So this is the Phalaenopsis schilleriana. Once again, it's got two roots that are sort of hanging by a thread and another active root. So I'm going to be really, really careful. I'm putting this in a 3-inch pot just because it doesn't have too many roots yet and it needs to push out a couple more. I think this orchid is healthy because it's already pushed out a new leaf for me. The bottom leaves have died off, which is totally normal, but it just needs some time to grow some roots. So I'm really, really careful with this. I'm making sure that that sphagnum moss is quite fluffy, quite airy, and that it's not suffocating the existing root system. So once we've got this in here, we are all done, and we just need some time for this orchid to adapt and make sure that it grows some new roots. So before moving on, I want to quickly show you one of my mini phals that I repotted a couple months ago. This was in a 3-inch pot, and look at the roots. So, I mean, I'll never buy those Repotme pots again. I just feel like it was a waste, and this is like 4 months of growth. So I'm actually, based on that, I'm going to be putting my mini phals into 4-inch pots without any holes on them because repotting can be quite tricky. So I'm taking this orchid and I've put a little bit of moss on the bottom. It's got 2 aerial roots. Unfortunately, aerial roots are not the most pliable, so I'm trying to be very careful in tucking those roots into the pot. And again, this is a mini. Hopefully it stays mini. Some mini orchids end up growing to be much larger than you'd expect. So hopefully this one doesn't get too big. But I am just being really careful with this one, trying to tuck in the roots and surrounding it with sphagnum moss. Once again, just like the schilleriana, I'm keeping it very fluffy, but in this case, it's going in a bigger pot because it has much more roots. Now I'm noticing that I left a huge, massive air pocket there where some of the roots are, so I'm tucking some of that moss inside. With organic, air pockets are totally fine, but that was a huge gap, so I'm just pushing some of that moss in, and when I pushed it in, I pulled some of it out so that it remained fluffy. So sort of think of it, you press in and then you pull out a little bit, and it'll keep the mixture not... Alrighty, this is the last guy that may have had mealybugs. I'm going to do the same thing with this orchid, put it in a 4-inch pot with sphagnum moss, but I'm going to do something a little different. So to prevent the air pockets, I decided to put some moss into the root ball. So that'll prevent me from having those massive air pockets. And then I could put moss all around the roots and not have to worry about the inside of the roots. So I've started by putting some moss all around. I'm very cognizant of the root that's sticking up. It's inevitable. You're going to have roots all over the place, but I'm going to try to tuck in the ones that are sticking up. So I have more room for more orchids instead of more roots all around. But I noticed one little air gap. So I took my little stick and I pushed some down, and then I just, pressed a little bit, but I've kept it quite airy, as you can see here. It's not compacted. We are all set. The 3 orchids have been repotted. The mini phals will be just fine. They'll be pushing roots like crazy. And then I just need the phal schilleriana to push out a couple more roots, and then it'll be good to go. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Leave me a comment down below if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye, everyone.